Setsu is an ugly bum who got Isekai'd but came back to the real world and hid his identity as an overpowered hero. However, after getting Isekai'd with his class again, he reveals his powers to save the world, causing all the baddies to start thirsting after his magnum. It all starts with Setsu trying to enjoy some alone time in class, while Yui keeps trying to start a conversation. After he reminds her that constantly talking to him will make everyone believe they are friends with benefits, she says it doesn't matter and continues messing with his hair until the outside world suddenly gets engulfed in darkness. Just then, a portal appears right in the middle of their class, but while they all get shocked, Setsu smiles as he already knows what comes next. Moments later, they end up in another world and watch in horror as medieval cyborgs charge toward them with maces. As they all take off running to find safety, Setsu stands in place, so Yui grabs him to sacrifice herself, but he easily flicks the giant away and acts like nothing happened. He then grabs Yui to catch up with the rest of their classmates right before a group of knights shows up to fight off the giants. Just as Setsu realizes that a powerful curse is controlling the armored demons, a chick named Iruka shows up and tells them to stay away from the battle before joining another knight named Grain to fight off the giants. Several minutes after that, they all get assembled before the king, who then welcomes them and claims they are heroes sent to save all of humanity from the demon race. Naturally, they all get confused and think he is probably suffering from a rare kind of dementia, so the princess decides to tell them about a hero who was summoned to their world just a few years ago and managed to help them attain peace. When she asks them to help protect humanity like the hero did back then, they discuss it amongst themselves and agree that there is no way they can go from hopping on TikTok trends to fighting off possessed cyborgs. However, seeing as they can only choose between helping out and going back to the open fields, they decide to stay, so the princess explains where they can find rooms to sleep. Later that day, the guys get started on sword training with help from Grain, while Iruka teaches the girls how to draw out their magical abilities. After Yui ends up being the only one strong enough to draw out her magic, Setsu, who has been watching, decides to head out, but then he sees Iruka and greets her like she is some average NPC. She gets impressed by the balls he has to treat her like an acquaintance, but promises to deal with him severely if he doesn't join the others to train. He then responds by challenging her, so she runs in to discipline him and gets her buns warmed up by a hot smack. Upon realizing who he is, she starts treating him like a king and offers to serve as a human stool while expressing how happy she is to finally be useful. The next moment, Grain shows up and initially thinks Iruka has completely lost her mind, but after hearing her out and taking a closer look at Setsu, he realizes that he is actually the hero that saved them 5 years ago. Minutes later, they get to Thea's lab to break the news, but she claims to have already sensed his aura minutes ago before Setsu walks in and takes a look around while she cooks up a potion. She then welcomes him back to their world, but Iruka's curiosity about his disappearance gets the best of her, so they head to the city walls to talk about it. Just then, Setsu sees what appears to be the mark of an explosion and remembers fighting someone named Toma. When he asks if Toma is still alive, Iruka tells him that he went missing around the time of his disappearance. Setsu then tells them about the curse controlling the demons and says the only person with such power is Toma. After Grain leaves to answer the king, Setsu and the girls stay back to take in the view, but he continues to wonder why Toma would be attacking humanity with demons. Meanwhile, Grain has just voiced his disapproval of the king's decision to wage war on the demon continent and suggests waiting to hear from the messenger they sent over there. After the princess says the demons have most likely used that messenger for dessert, she tells them that taking a stand against the demon continent is the only way forward, and all the nobles present accept her proposal to launch an offensive strike. Later on, Yui tries to work on her magic, but she gets startled by Setsu, who was only trying to check on her. He notices how sad she looks and asks about it, so she tells him there is nothing good about learning magic if she has to use it against other creatures. Hours later, Grain meets up with the girls again and explains how he managed to stall the king's decision to start the war by using the fact that Setsu's classmates still need a lot of training. Realizing that it will only be a matter of time before the war starts, Setsu decides to go stop it by himself, but then the girls offer to help him out. After he says that they have to stay back in case Toma plans to unleash a surprise attack, they agree to it, so he asks for his sword. The following day, they get help from Thea to sneak into the castle, and Iruka knocks an innocent guard out before they stuff him into a dumpster to avoid attention. Unfortunately, some other guards eventually find him and sound the alarm, so every available knight starts trying to find them. After Grain and Thea head out to distract them, Setsu grabs Iruka to make sure she doesn't smash any other heads. Minutes later, they manage to reach a bridge at the edge of town without getting caught, so Iruka promises to keep the kingdom safe in his absence. Just then, Yui shows up and starts asking questions, so Setsu decides to come clean about everything. When she begs to follow him, he promises to stay safe and says he is taking on the mission to make sure she remains protected. She then makes him wait and shows him how far she has already come with magic before saying she will spend every waking moment training so she can also help him when the time comes. In a jeweler's shop 5 years ago, a girl named Ruri watched as her grandfather refused to sell a valuable artifact to a mysterious customer who wanted to get it at all costs. When Ruri asked if he was causing trouble, her grandfather said he was probably just a trust fund brat looking to mess around and kept refusing to sell until the customer offered up a small fortune. After he left, Ruri reminded her grandfather of his teaching about placing self-respect over money, so her grandfather explained how a few gold coins were far more important than dignity. Unfortunately, his time on Earth ran out just a few years later, so Ruri decided to take over his business as a smith. A couple of nights later, Ruri heads out with a carriage to reach the port town, but then her horse senses trouble along the way and suddenly stops. Just then, a giant boar rams her off the wagon, so she crawls to get the most valuable item and makes sure it is still in one piece before getting back up. Upon remembering that a demon boar wants to feast on her insides, she tries to offer it some money and food, but then it suddenly gets split in half by Setsu, who happened to be passing by at the time. He then tries to make sure Ruri is okay, but she misinterprets his good wishes and says she doesn't have a dime left to pay for the rescue. After telling her not to worry about it, he offers her a hand up, but then she takes a closer look and realizes that he looks a lot like the mysterious client from 5 years ago. Once she gets back on her feet, he asks why she is carrying such valuable items through the forest all alone, so she explains how no one agreed to escort her for free. As he prepares to leave, she asks if he can be her guard for the rest of the trip and promises to pay, but he declines the offer and says he has personal matters to attend to. After she explains how important the item she is holding is and spends a few minutes begging, he decides to help, so they get on the horse and agree to abandon everything else. The following day, they reach the port town, and he gets surprised seeing how busy it is, so she explains how the trade business greatly increased after the war ended 5 years ago. She then tells him about a captain she paid for the final journey across the sea, but he cancels the trip moments later and reminds her that the demon continent might soon start another war with them. Setsu also asks if she has a death wish, but she refuses to give up and starts asking every captain she can find to see if anyone will help. When Setsu eventually decides to support her determination, 3 knights suddenly show up and demand to know what she is planning. As she quickly hands over her business documents, they take one look at them before asking for the item in her bag. After she says it's too important to be handed over easily, they try to use force, but then Setsu reminds them that it's illegal to search lawful civilians. They immediately start to threaten him, so he gets ready for an actual fight, and they grab onto their swords as well. Thankfully, everyone else gathers around them to know what the problem is, so the cops decide to back off and promise to arrest them the next time they run into each other. At a water fountain hours later, Ruri thanks Setsu for his help again and asks how he even knew what to say, so he tells her about grain. After also commending her on how she handled herself, he promises to help her continue the search for a sailor but suggests finding an inn first so they can get some rest. By nightfall, they manage to secure a room, so she decides to take a bath and hands him the jewel to watch. When he asks if she now trusts him, she decides to prove it by letting him see, but then he recognizes the jewel. She then explains how her grandfather's reputation as a highly skilled jeweler made him the only one who could fix it when a customer brought it in. Unfortunately, that was around the time his illness became severe, but after managing to get it fixed, he called him for some advice and made her promise to deliver it to the customer. After she enters the bathroom to get cleaned up, Setsu unleashes some of its magic just to be sure that it is the same jewel he once fortified with protection magic. Much later, Ruri falls into a deep sleep and keeps Setsu up with her fists until he hears the policeman from earlier as they walk in to ask the receptionist for their rooms. As Setsu quickly grabs his sword, they barge in and nearly give Ruri a stroke before Setsu jumps out the window with her to escape. After minutes of running through town, they get to the very edge of the town's wall, and the knights order Setsu to surrender as he has nowhere else to run to. When he starts roasting them, Ruri fears that he might actually be insane, but he takes it a step further by grabbing her and jumping off the edge. After landing on a water dragon named Levia, Setsu tells her to take them to the demon continent, so she heads out while the knights decide to accept that they had too much to drink and are probably just seeing things. Moments later, Ruri realizes that Levia is actually the goddess of the ocean and tries to figure out who Setsu really is before seeing the demon continent on the other side. Just a few minutes after sunrise, Levia takes on a kraken, so Setsu hypes her up until she starts begging for help as the kraken puts her in a chokehold and releases some ink to finish her off. After transforming into a human body, she tells Ruri to be grateful that she gets to stand so close to a goddess before asking Setsu why he didn't help her. He then reminds her that it's been 5 years since he last saw an epic kaiju battle, but she still gets pissed because he only summoned her so she could become his ocean taxi. Ruri, who still can't believe that she is standing in front of a goddess, then asks if they have any plans for the squid, and Livia says Setsu has to handle it on his own. Moments later, Ruri takes a bite of his special fried squid and falls in love with the taste, so Livia admits that he is not completely useless. After she tells him how to get to a demon fishing village nearby, he tells Ruri that he has business with the person she is delivering the brooch to. When he tells Livia that it's Sereno, Ruri gets confused by the fact that they both seem to know her, so Livia explains that Sereno is the current demon lord, and Ruri literally turns to stone as the fear overwhelms her. Livia then gets up to return to the water, but Setsu asks why she won't tag along with them. Once again, she reminds him how he only summoned her for transport after vanishing for 5 years and watched while she almost got clapped by a kraken. As he tries to explain what happened, 3 little demons show up and tell Livia to dump him because he will never be worthy of her divine plot. He then stuffs their faces with squid rings to shut them up, but they fall in love with the taste and keep running laps around him while asking for more. Moments later, he decides to take the kraken to the fishing village in case he has to appease the locals, who are currently having a meeting to discuss survival tactics because the same kraken has stopped them from fishing. When Setsu arrives and asks for a stash house to store its corpse, they decide to throw a party and worship Livia for saving their livelihood, while Setsu gets forced to cook for the entire town. As their party progresses, a demon knight named Brad sees smoke rising from the village and thinks they got ambushed by humans, so he takes off running to save them. At the time, Livia has just found Ruri, who can barely make a straight sentence because of the sugar rush from an insane amount of orange juice. When Ruri asks Livia how she met Setsu, she sits beside her and explains how he basically turned her into a sandbag on her own turf and made her help with his mission to end the war. After Ruri says she never knew Setsu was that strong, Livia asks if she didn't hear rumors of his escapades on the human continent. Ruri then finally connects the dots and experiences the shock of a lifetime as she realizes that he is the hero responsible for saving all of humanity. As his unusual relationships with the most overpowered baddies start to make sense, Ruri asks Livia if he is the reason why she stopped throwing hands with every monster in the sea, and she admits to it before saying that it isn't fair how he just vanished after making her submissive. As she glances over at him and smiles uncontrollably, Ruri suspects that she wants something else and asks if she has feelings for him, but she denies it and says there is no way she can have a romantic relationship with a mere human. Just then, Brad crashes into the stage and threatens to murk Setsu, but the little demons think he is probably just a homeless nut job and offer him some squid rings. Several minutes later, Livia sits by the edge of a docking bridge to enjoy some fresh fish, but he interrupts to apologize for crashing the party and says he was surprised to see her in human form. When Setsu also shows up to see him, he expresses how happy he is to see them both together again, but Setsu asks if there is a problem because he rarely ever leaves Sereno alone in the castle. After asking them both to save her, Brad explains that she is about to marry a stupid rich merchant named Taran. Livia initially gets confused because marriage is usually a good thing, but then Brad tells them that it's more like an enslavement ritual because, instead of a ring, Taran gave Sereno a necklace with powerful subjugation magic to control her. When he tells Setsu that it all started with the invasion by humans a couple of months ago, Setsu gets surprised and asks for more details, so Brad describes the giant armored knights the humans sent to their continent. He further explains how Taran conveniently showed up around the same time and promised to help end the war in exchange for turning Sereno into his personal nut drainer. Setsu then asks if he actually has enough power to affect the war, so Ruri tells him that Taran currently controls most of the world's trading ships, making him the richest merchant alive. After Brad explains how Taran's countless fleet of ships makes him the best ally to guarantee the safety of the demon continent, Setsu says that it's probably why Sereno easily let the subjugation magic control her. As Brad says there might be no other way to save her, Setsu grabs him by the neck to ask if all her generals are really just going to stand by and watch, but Brad says they are all ready to risk their lives for her. Setsu still struggles to understand why they haven't put up a fight, so Livia reminds him of the promise Sereno made to keep the peace before his disappearance. She then decides that it is the main reason why they have to protect her before running through the forest with Setsu to reach her palace. Just then, forest monsters show up to stop them, but Livia easily cuts them all down with her powers before asking Setsu if he has an actual plan. after he says they just have to stop the wedding from happening. She reminds him that Terran still has leverage over Sereno with the subjugation jewel and the demon continent's need for his wealth. He then tells her that Terran is definitely tied to whatever started the war and explains how they were attacked by the same giant knights Brad was talking about earlier. After they both agree that Terran's wedding to Sereno must be stopped at all costs, Levia takes out the rest of the forest monsters, and they keep running until the castle becomes visible. After defeating Sereno 5 years ago, Setsu suggested a truce to end all the fighting and gave her the jewel imbued with protection magic so she could always remember him and their promise. Not long after that, Brad told her about his sudden disappearance, and although it broke her heart, she decided to hold on to the promise she made to him. As a result of that decision, the Demon Continent experienced a steady growth in their economy over the following years. On a random day, while Serena was walking through town with Brad to check on her subjects, the jewel Setsu gave her broke. Thankfully, Brad had already heard about Ruri's grandfather by then, so he promised to get it fixed and eventually send it out to him. Several days after that, Serena was in the throne room when a knight rushed in to tell her that they were being invaded by humans in giant armor. After ordering for all the current demon knights to be assembled, Sereno sent 2 demons named Zeon and Lamina on a mission to figure out Destinia's intentions so they could be sure it was really time for another war. Just a few days after that, her knights had already started stashing supplies to prepare for war and greatly wished they had never agreed to the truce. Over a month later, Sereno started to get worried as Zeon and Lamina had still not returned with word from Destinia, and she began to wonder if the promise with Setsu could be maintained. Just then, Brad came in to inform her of Terran's request for a meeting, and she agreed to it because practically everyone already knew who he was. Minutes later, everyone on the Demon Council became furious at his proposal for marriage and asked if he had his senses intact, so he assured them that it had all been well planned out and promised to use his resources to make sure they win the war if it came down to it. When he presented the subjugation necklace, they easily sensed the dark magic oozing out of it, and Sereno commended him on being prepared because there was no way she would easily submit to a human. Brad already expected her to reject the proposal, but then she asked for some time to think, which left them all shocked. After Terran reminded her that they didn't really have a lot of time to consider their options, he left, and Sereno asked for some space, but Brad stayed back to talk some sense into her. He reminded her that the entire demon army would rather die fighting for her than watch her ride a human sausage, but she said that was the main reason why she couldn't just refuse Terran's proposal. While she spent the rest of that night crying over the choice she had to make, Terran was in a carriage with a mysterious demon, yapping about how easy it was to make Sereno see that he was her ticket to safety. When he asked if they could stop using the armored knights to deceive her, Kadru refused and explained that they had to keep the fake attacks consistent because it was what his master wanted. It is now the night of the wedding, and almost every noble family of both human and demon descent has filled up the chapel to watch the great Sereno marry Terran, who excitedly waits at the altar until she shows up. While the priest explains their vows, he keeps glancing over to really take in how beautiful she is before showing everyone the subjugation necklace and explaining how he will usher in a new era of peace and progress for the demon kingdom. When it finally gets to Sereno's turn to accept the necklace, she thinks about Setsu and wishes she could have seen him one last time. Just as she reaches for the necklace, the painted glass shatters, and Setsu jumps in before offering her a hand up. Upon seeing him, Terran instructs his guards to take him out, but Levia easily blasts them away before telling Sereno to stick to darker colors. Just then, Keijuru activates a dark skill to trap her and summons tentacles to finish her off, but they get destroyed, which leaves him shocked. He quickly tries to find out who did it before Setsu yeets him into a bunch of chairs like a bowling ball. Keijuru easily recovers from that and attacks him with a scythe, but Setsu easily catches it and tears through the attack with his sword. After Setsu blocks the tentacles and swats him into a pillar, Keijuru promises to settle the score after fixing his broken back and rips a hole through the wall to escape. Sereno then throws herself on Setsu and demands to know why he left her all alone, but their reunion gets put on hold when Levia notices something eerie about Terran's guards. After Setsu takes a look and learns that they are made from curses, he picks up the subjugation necklace to watch it crumble and says Toma is definitely the one behind everything. Sereno admits that she also suspected it and promises to make him pay when she gets the chance, so Setsu tells her to keep taking care of her kingdom while he pays a visit to King Regulus. As Levia starts complaining about being his designated driver again, Ruri shows up with Brad, who immediately loses it over how messed up the chapel is. Ruri then hands over the jewel to him, and he reminds Sereno of their promise before placing it on her neck. After arresting Terran, Sereno wishes Setsu luck on his journey, and he promises to spend quality time with her once the war is over. After Ruri tells him that Sereno gave her a permit to set up a shop as a reward for delivering the jewel, Brad promises to help if he ever needs assistance with anything. Once Setsu checks with Levia to make sure she is ready, they start heading out, and Serena reminds him to come see her as soon as he finishes saving the world again. Many years ago, when Yuhi and Setsu's parents first introduced them to each other, she asked if he wanted to hang out at the playground, but he refused and claimed his IQ was too advanced for the stupid games she wanted to play. Despite that, they ended up getting really close and practically did everything together, but Setsu managed to keep up his toxic, nonchalant attitude. While walking home together one evening, she saw a poster for a prestigious school and asked if he wanted to go there with her, but he told her not to even consider it because there was no way her undeveloped brain could handle such an academy. His words made her feel extremely bad about herself, so she decided to enter her villain arc to become a modern-day Einstein. After months of hard work, she took a mock exam to see if she was finally good enough, but her microbrain failed her once again. Just then, a group of negative IQ dropouts saw the result sheet and told her that school was for betas who wanted to be stuck in the Matrix. Just as they suggested ditching regular life to hang with them, Setsu showed up and told the unemployed meth head to go pick on someone else. After they left, he admitted that they were not completely wrong because she was just too stupid to survive with him in a top-ranked school. For some reason, she took his verbal assault like it was nothing and said she would do anything just to be in the same school as him. He then saw how determined she actually was and offered to help her study, but also promised not to go easy just because they were friends. In Destinia at the time, all the other girls have just started using their magic and express how excited they are until Yui shows them what real power looks like. After commending Yuhi on her improvement, Iruka dismisses them. But while the others return to their rooms to rest, Yubi chases after Iruka and Grain. At the steps, she asks about their relationship with Setsu, and Iruka starts talking about how he changed her life simply by being so strong. After yapping about her love for Setsu for a couple of minutes, she finally asks Yuhi what she wanted, so Yuhi asks for special training because she wanted to one day stand beside Setsu. Later that night, Iruka takes her to the wall to show her the effects of Setsu's bravery during the war, before telling her that she needs to max out all her stats and always be prepared to help if the need arises. Upon hearing that, Yui swears to get stronger and challenges her, so Iruka promises not to go easy and charges in with her sword. Yui manages to block the first attack, so Iruka decides to use icicles, but Yui counters with flame magic. They then spend a few minutes in a strength contest until Yui takes a couple of steps back and suddenly starts glazing Iruka to hide the fact that she is gassed. Iruka then explains that she is still lacking something before taking her into the sewers to face the final test for new knights. The next moment, a monster crocodile jumps out of the water, and Iruka tells Yuhi that she has to defeat it if she truly wants to stand beside Setsu. Despite nearly soaking her pants in bladder juice, Yui summons enough courage and uses her flame magic to burn up the monster croc. She gets excited, thinking it is over, but Iruka tells her to look again because her little fire magic has only made the croc angry. It immediately charges in to bite her head off, but she stops it with her staff and ends up taking a bunch of nasty cuts from its claws. After she unleashes an even stronger blast, it falls back again, but still gets back on its feet. When Iruka tells her to finish it off, she hesitates, so Iruka explains that her hesitation to send her enemies to the other side is why she was so weak. She then uses her own magic to murk the croc and leaves Yuhi to think about everything she just said. The next morning, Yui remains in bed, lost in thought, when Thea shows up and uses healing magic on her wounds. While doing that, she explains that Iruka was only pushing her because she saw her potential and thought she could actually get strong enough to fight alongside them. Thea then warns her that fighting beside Setsu is nothing to look forward to, and asks why she is basically trying to sign her own death certificate. After telling Thea how Setsu helped her throughout their childhood, Yui says she only wants to return the favor for once. Thea then wishes her luck and leaves the room before telling Iruka not to worry about her. Despite that, Iruka still remains convinced that she isn't mentally strong enough to handle the tough choices a real battle would force her to make. Later that day, as Grain is on his way out, he sees Yui still deep in thought and pulls her aside to talk. After saying that chopping off the heads of his enemies is easy because he would rather make them suffer than let them harm his friends, he advises her to find her own reason for fighting and leaves so she could think about it. During classes the following day, Yui casually decides to create a giant pillar of fire and leaves everyone in a state of shock. Hours later, Iruka takes her back to the sewers to face another croc, but this time, Yui decides to stop being a spineless wuss. Once it tries to attack, she charges up her staff and shoots out an insanely powerful blast that turns the croc into instant steak. Iruka immediately praises her for finally accepting the harsh nature of warfare, but then she shows her that the croc is just unconscious. Yugi then tells Iruka that she would never end any life and Iruka decided to let her keep living in Delulu land because she can at least control fire better than Prince Zuko. The next day, Grain informs them of the king's decision to begin advancing toward the demon continent and dismisses the class so they could start making preparations. Meanwhile, Setsu, who is still on the way to the Beastman continent, tells Ledia to stop stuffing her face before reminding her of the speech she gave about giving her all for the mission. After saying that she is basically useless until they get to the port, she continues eating, so he asks why she won't just transport them there in a single bound. She then complains about how doing that requires a lot of magical energy and says she doesn't have enough juice before something makes the carriage stop. Setsu quickly grabs his sword to fight, but it turns out to be two innocent-looking chicks trying to catch a ride. Just then, Elise takes a closer look and recognizes Setsu before holding back the tears because she never expected to see him again. Minutes later, he tells Ledia how Elise helped him during his mission the last time he got summoned. As Elise starts talking about the unusual techniques Setsu used to teach her how to fight, Ledia starts to suspect that he gave her an illegal type of training, but then Amir interrupts to introduce herself. Elise then says they are sisters, but Setsu gets confused because he doesn't remember her saying anything about a sister when they first met. After saying there is a reason for it, she asks where he has been for the past 5 years, and everyone suddenly gets interested in what he has to say. He proceeds to spend the following hours explaining his life story and how he spent 5 years enduring the BS happening in the real world before asking if they would like to tag along for his trip to the Beastman continent. When Elise turns him down and only says that she has something else to take care of, Amir admits that it is her fault. Elise had been taking up monster hunting jobs as training ever since Setsu disappeared and eventually got hired to take care of a dragon problem in a small town. She ended up staying at Amir's place on the first night, and after dinner she got curious because Amir seemed a little young to be staying all alone. Amir then told her about her older brother who disappeared after the dragon showed up and has been missing ever since. After Amir served her some apples, Elise felt pity and decided to stop traveling so she could stay with her as an older sister, and Amir got excited to finally have someone else in the house with her. When Setsu says Amir's brother most definitely became the first dragon's lunch, Levi reminds him that not everyone responds well to this psychotic version of dark humor. Elise then ignores it and explains how a bunch of other villagers, who have also been reported missing, seemingly vanish without so much as a sign of struggle, which makes no sense if it was an actual dragon attack. Back then, Elise became convinced that they were being spirited away and started her mission by taking down the seals against evil. After she told Amir about her plan to lure the dragon in and take it out, Amir got worried, but she promised to make it back safely and told her to head inside. Just a few minutes after Amir left, the dragon appeared and tried to blast Elise, but she dodged and gave it a nasty cut with her sword before chasing after it. She eventually lost track of the dragon and decided to head back, but then she saw that everyone left in the village had mysteriously disappeared except for Amir, who was still hiding inside the house. Seeing as the entire village had been cleaned out, she decided to take Amir to the city for a fresh start, but couldn't stop wondering what happened to everyone. When she asks Setsu and Ledia for ideas, Ledia tells her that the villagers might actually be zombies being controlled by a powerful necromancer, but Setsu says it doesn't explain how they all vanished without a trace. After saying that they are probably magical zombies with the ability to go invisible, she suggests that the dragon might also be a zombie, but then Setsu fixes the malfunction in her brain with the food box. Livia further suggests that it could be a siren using her song to bewitch the villagers, but Setsu reminds her that the village is in the mountains, and Amir adds that sea monsters like Levia smell worse than rotten sushi, which makes it impossible for no one to have noticed. When Setsu also comes up with his own theory and says the villagers were probably abducted by a UFO, Levia also cracks his skull, so he thinks about it again before saying that the dragon might be an advanced sea monster like Levia that can transform and blend in as a human. He then asks if she can make people vanish, and after Levia says she can't, Elise tells them she didn't actually know that Levia is the goddess of the seas. Just then, the driver stops the carriage because of the rising water levels, and Setsu starts asking why the dragon keeps coming back for the villagers, so Levia says it could be because they use magic. She explains that excessive use of magic can attract monsters capable of sensing it, but Setsu says that still doesn't explain the continuous disappearances. He then suggests the possibility of transportation magic being used and asks Levia if that level of magic could attract a dragon. After she says yes, he comes up with a new theory and says someone is making the people disappear with transportation magic, which is what attracts the dragon. Elise then says the user has to be really close by to easily make the people vanish, and Setsu reminds them that such high-level magic takes a few years to repair, which conveniently matches the time when Amir showed up. Amir starts saying she could never do such a thing, and Elise defends her, but then Setsu reminds them that she easily got Livia's scent and knew who she was from the jump. After pointing out the fact that Livia is extremely careful with her scent to the point where Elise, a skilled monster hunter, can't even sense it, he asks Amir to explain how she knew. She then remains silent for a brief moment before admitting that she has been behind it all. She immediately tries to blow them up in the carriage, but Setsu makes it out with the girls before she changes into her dragon form. As she starts blasting, Setsu runs to evade her attacks, and Livia gets behind her to find an opening. But Elise remains shocked by how gullible she was. After making her snap out of it, Setsu runs to help her right as Amir starts charging in. As he blocks an insanely powerful blast, she falls back, so Livia uses some of her magic to power up his sword for a counter that sets her throat on fire. She immediately takes off to escape, but Elise jumps just in time to land the final blow and watches with the both of them as she becomes magic dust. Hours later, Livia asks Setsu if it was wise to leave Elise all alone after everything, so he explains how it is the best way to help her become stronger. At the time, Elise has just gotten back to Amir's house and reminisces on the time they spent together before Amir shows up with a bunch of monster pets behind her. Elise then prepares for another fight and asks who she really is, so Amir says that she is actually called Melior the Monster Mummy and explains how she turned the villagers into the armored knights that triggered the war. Early the next day, in a small coastal town on the Beastman continent, a chick named Shironeko has just finished shopping. She tries to lead the market, but the locals keep giving her free stuff for her help with their businesses and offer support for her sick sister. After she thanks them and heads off, a bunch of little beastmen try to get combat lessons from her, but she tells them to focus on making sandcastles and continues receiving gifts. When she eventually gets back home in the evening, her sister, Mineko, tries to talk about how everyone in town is in love with her, but her coughs start up, so Shironeko pours out her medicine to help ease the pain. When she finishes the cup, Shironeko pulls her in for a hug and promises to keep working until they can get rid of her sickness for good. The next morning, a beaver-faced sailor gets mad at Setsu because he won't stop asking for a boat ride. He then tells Lydia to accept that she has to carry him all the way to King Regulus, but she gets pissed because he keeps treating her like a tool. After he apologizes for neglecting her feelings and rubs her head, she loses the anger and tells him to keep using sweet words. But then, the sailor tells him that there is actually a free boat they can use. While she starts arguing with both of them, Shironeko walks by and goes into a nearby inn, where a smoking hot baddie named Kuroinu gives her a new bottle of Mineko's medicine. After Shironeko thanks her for always helping them get new bottles, Kuroinu tells her not to worry about it and walks over to show her a wanted picture of Setsu. She then explains that chopping his head off will set her up for life to the point where she can finally treat Mineko's sickness. The next moment, Setsu walks in with Lydia, who is still upset, and Shironeko immediately turns to leave, but she gets a good look at Setsu before heading out. Setsu and Livia initially try to get a room to rest, but Livia starts complaining about being hungry, so they ask for a good restaurant instead. Hours later, Shironeko finishes up with her dinner and sees that Mineko has barely eaten anything due to her sickness, so she makes up her mind and says she has one last errand to run. Several minutes later, Setsu and Livia finally fall asleep in their room, so Kuroinu closes up and meets up with Shironeko at the back. When Shironeko suddenly asks her to be a big sister to her and Mineko and thanks her for always watching out for them, Kuroinu gets shocked but says they can become a family after she takes Setsu out. Shironeko then excitedly grabs the keys and enters their room to finish him off, but after she attacks and realizes that it's illusion magic, Setsu uses a spin kick to send her flying through the window. He immediately jumps out after her and asks if she is working for Toma, but she only says he has to be killed and activates her beast arms. As she jumps to use a fireball on him, he easily cuts through it with his sword, so she jumps to try again. But this time, he jumps with her and lands a sizzling slap that sends her crashing into a shed. After taking a closer look at her, he sees that she is using cursed magic and instinctively knows that she is somehow connected to Toma. Minutes later, Shironeko wakes up at home and sees Setsu, so she gets ready to fight again. But Mineko tells her to chill out and explains that he and Livia brought her home with a fresh hand tattoo on her face. Setsu then claims to understand why she is trying to unalive him because he has already seen all the medicine bottles, but then he says that Mineko is perfectly fine. Using a magic revealing skill, he shows them the cursed magic draining her life force and says the drugs have only made it stronger. Livia immediately tries to play detective, but he stops her and says they have to focus on healing Mineko first. Shironeko immediately starts apologizing for trying to send them to the other side and begs him to heal her. He tells her not to worry and says the process might cause Mineko some pain. Once Mineko lays down for the healing, he uses a large amount of magical energy to summon a sword he claims will be strong enough to absorb cursed magic. Using a special command, he makes the sword drain it out, but then Kuroinu shows up, and Shironeko immediately jumps in to protect Setsu from her ninja star. After calling Shironeko an incompetent fool, she tries to handle Setsu on her own, but Livia uses a water blast to introduce herself. Setsu then says he can't stop the process and tells her to handle Kuroinu on her own. But Kuroinu says she doesn't even qualify as an opponent and tries using the ninja stars again. When Livia easily blocks it, Kuroinu realizes her mistake and demands to know why a goddess is running around with a human. But Livia tells her to stop the yapping so they can actually fight. Kuroinu then attacks with a bunch of shadow clones to confuse her, but Livia stabs through all of them and forces her back. After drawing water up from the earth, she shatters nearly every bone in Kuroinu's midsection before promising to spare her life if she spills everything she knows about Toma's plans. Just then, Shironeko comes out and starts asking Kuroinu why she betrayed them, but Kuroinu responds by calling her a worthless, fur-brained loser. As Lydia threatens her again, she explains how Toma plans to destroy all the species so he can become a god, and says she is among his most loyal servants. After Lydia asks how he plans to do that despite being only human, Kuroinu cracks open a vanishing orb and uses the blinding light to escape. Just then, Setsu comes out, and Shironeko immediately runs to hug Mineko, who is finally back to normal. He then shows Lydia the cursed necklace and says Toma is still too immature to be playing god, but Livia says he might actually pull it off with all the help he has been getting. So Setsu promises to stop him at all costs. Several minutes after sunrise, they both get on the canoe the sailor promised and start heading for the Beastman capital city. But then he spots the sisters and tells the sailor to stop. After telling him that they will need beastmen like them to easily pass through the capital city, Mineko says she also wants to see Kuroinu again so they can talk about her betrayal. Setsu then checks with Lydia to be sure she is okay with it before helping them climb into the canoe. Years ago, Setsu decided to have a sparring match with King Regulus' daughter to test her strength, and she kept refusing to acknowledge him as a master despite the fact that he had already saved the world. Currently, the noble beastmen have just gathered for a meeting in the throne room to make a choice between joining the war and taking on both sides or hoarding their resources to stay protected. As the meeting progresses, the usually distinguished beastmen begin arguing like barbarians, but then Regulus picks up a familiar scent. As he tries to tell Ro, she also notices and excitedly runs out. Meanwhile, Setsu and the girls have just arrived, so he tries to explain how he knows Regulus to the guards, but they refuse to listen. Shironeko and Mineko then defend him and expect their recent popularity with the beastmen to help smooth things over, but the guards threaten to toss them into the water if they don't stop the cap. Just as the whole situation starts to frustrate Setsu, he hears someone yelling his name before Ro drops in and knocks out the guards. After making sure his scent and aura are the same as the last time they saw each other, she expresses how happy she is to finally see him again and gives him a hug. Just then, she tries to turn their wholesome reunion into a chance to attack him, but he notices and quickly pins her down. She then asks if he will become her master again, but he refuses and says he hates training weaklings that are too stupid to learn. While Shironeko and Mineko struggle to believe that she is actually King Regulus' daughter, she grabs Setsu's arm and starts leading him into the palace while asking about his disappearance. As he starts rubbing her face, Lydia and the girls wish they were that close to him and continue watching like spectators until Regulus storms out to see him. After Setsu smashes him against the floor as a way of greeting him, Regulus checks to make sure it is actually him before asking if he would like to fight before they throw him a welcoming party. Setsu turns down both offers and says they have more important issues to discuss, but Regulus already knows that it's about the war, so Setsu decides to get straight to the point and tells him about Toma. Regulus immediately tries to assemble a unit so they can head out together, but Setsu stops him, and Livia says it would be best for him to stay back in his kingdom in case Toma tries to pull something. Ro then offers to go in his place, and he accepts, but then a beastman soldier named Luger comes in and introduces himself as the kingdom's top commander, as well as Ro's fiancé before opposing the idea. Regulus reminds him that Setsu stopped the first war, but Luger claims he can't be trusted anymore because of his little vanishing act after playing Superman. Ro then steps in to defend Setsu, but Luger still refuses to accept that Setsu is not the enemy and challenges him to a duel. After Regulus supports the idea and says the winner will get to marry Ro, Setsu tries to talk them out of it, but Luger immediately starts heading out to prepare. Moments later, Setsu tells Regulus that he doesn't like always having to fight whenever he pays him a visit, but Regulus tells him that it's the only language his people understand. When Ro grabs his arm and starts calling him master again, Shironeko and Mineko get tired of watching and try to get in on the action, but Livia tells them to wait their turn. Later that night, Ro pays a visit to Luger and tells him that trying to look good for her and getting a chance at smashing her buns won't end well for him. After saying that he is simply doing what any guy would do for love, he shows her a rune he got from a mysterious mage to amplify his strength and says he will risk it all to prove that he is worthy of her heart. The next day, all the beastmen go nuts with excitement in the arena, while Ro hypes Setsu up and makes Luger even more jealous. After Regulus explains the rules and gives them permission to start, Luger charges in with his claws at super speed, but Setsu easily dodges it and commends him on actually being fast. Luger then uses a flying claw attack, but Setsu sends it back and gets him in the face before suggesting that he pull out his strongest move because the fight is already getting boring. After promising to make him regret those words, Luger transforms into a giant beast. Ro tries to warn Setsu of the strength increase that comes with it, but he quickly grabs Luger by the tail and smashes him into the arena wall. As the beastmen and Ro all cheer for Setsu, he asks Regulus if the fight is already over. But then Luger gets back up to continue, so Setsu tells him there is no shame in admitting defeat. Pissed off, Luger starts activating the rune on his arm and remembers watching Setsu train Ro all those years ago while he watched from the shadows and wished he had such god-level aura. As the cursed magic starts taking over, Mineko senses something bad is about to happen, and Livia tells Setsu to get out of the arena. But he immediately gets blasted into the wall. As Regulus immediately orders an evacuation of the arena, Livia gives Setsu his sword, and Luger charges in again, so Setsu chops off his arm to slow him down. After Luger immediately regenerates it and attacks again, Ro tries to stop him, but he completely loses it, so Setsu pulls her away. She then says he has to be killed, but Setsu reminds her of his healing technique and asks for cover so he can summon the sword. Just then, everything suddenly goes dark, and Luger's head suddenly drops right before Toma shows up and apologizes to Setsu for not being able to come see him in person just yet. Ro immediately cusses him out for deceiving Luger, so he tries to use a powerful spell on her, but Setsu gets ready to block it. Toma then accuses Setsu of betrayal and reminds him that they were the ones meant to be protecting each other. After Toma begins laughing like the Joker and swears to end every species to make sure they end up together again, Setsu promises to stop him no matter the cost. But Toma says it is already too late for that and wishes him luck before leaving. As Luger's body drops, Ro decides to pay her respects while Setsu heads to the throne room to ask Regulus for a ship to get to the demon continent. Regulus agrees to get him one and also promises to get his army ready to provide backup, so Setsu leaves to check on Ro. Seeing his face immediately makes her forget about the simp that literally risked it all for her love. It was 10 years ago when Setsu and Toma first got summoned to Distanai, and they were naturally confused because the king and his subjects kept calling them heroes when they had barely mastered the Nintendo Switch. Setsu eventually got upset and told them to stop the unnecessary glazing before asking for a proper explanation. Shortly after that, he had already started training to get stronger, which shocked Toma, as he couldn't understand why Setsu seemed so calm about everything. Setsu then told him that their only choice was to accept the situation and work on getting stronger because they now had to deal with dangers far worse than getting cancelled on social media. Toma still couldn't stop feeling anxious, so Setsu promised to look out for him until they could figure out all the answers to get back home. Later on, Setsu suddenly came up with the brilliant idea to stop the war, but Toma asked if he was high on nose candy because there was no way the both of them could stop a war that had the entire kingdom in distress. Setsu convinced him to at least think about giving it a try since they were technically heroes, and he ended up agreeing to his plan. Much later, Setsu decided to travel the world so he could learn more about the war, but Toma decided to hang back because he was still too weak, so they promised each other to meet again after he finished his training. Setsu then left with Grain, Iruka, and Thea that night, leaving Toma to train on his own until he eventually became a knight known as the Silver Hero a few years later. After that, he discussed his dreams of reuniting with Setsu and ending the war with help from the soldiers under his command, and they all swore an oath to lay down their lives for his cause. Not long after that, they attacked a part of the demon continent and broke into a temple to cut down every demon they could find. Once at the deepest part of the temple, Toma found a statue holding a gem before spotting the priests in charge of the temple, who immediately begged to be spared. After he promised to make it quick and chop their heads off, a lieutenant came in to tell him that they were done with the others. Toma then told him to round everyone else up, but as he turned to leave, a voice started speaking to him from the gem. He was initially confused and thought it was the PTSD catching up to him, but then it flooded his mind with memories of the promise he made with Setsu before completely gaining control of his body. Minutes later, he got back in control and saw that he had single-handedly clapped all his trusted soldiers and went insane. As he stumbled back outside, a knight showed up on a horse and told him of the peace treaty being signed to end the war. Just then, a carriage transporting all the leaders involved in signing the treaty passed by, but then he recognized Setsu's voice and saw him chatting with them. The following day, he watched in confusion as the truce was finalized with a monument to represent the era of peace Setsu had brought to the entire world. While the entire nation spent that night celebrating, Toma went to congratulate Setsu on the roof, but Setsu acted like he barely had anything to do with the war ending and also congratulated him on becoming a hero. Toma then tried to tell him something, but Iruka called him to join the party, so Setsu wished him well and started heading back inside. All of a sudden, Toma stopped him and said he was ready to return to the real world because the stone in the temple showed him a way to travel back. After Setsu called him stupid for trying to go back after they had just stopped the war, Toma's heart shattered, and the pain activated the cursed magic being contained in the gem. Setsu once again wished him luck and tried to leave, but Toma had already lost control to the cursed magic and swore to end all life so they could be together again. Just as he started going off the deep end, Setsu summoned his sword and blocked his attack, but Toma only became stronger, so they continued battling it out until Iruka started calling out to him again. Toma saw them and decided to start the genocide by chopping them to bits, but Setsu charged in to cut him down, ended up with a nasty cut to the gut, before he sliced into Toma's shoulder and triggered an insane explosion of dark energy. Seconds later, Iruka and the others got there, but Setsu had already vanished while Toma ended up back in the demon temple again. After he said his last words to the gem, it started glowing and showed him a research facility where some scientists had just forced Keijuru to get on a table before pumping him with weird chemicals for their magic experiments. While a freak named Bildos was also getting his brain cooked, Hiroinu was forcefully swapping limbs with her sisters, and Ymir had just been dipped into a mind-melting chemical bath. Upon sensing how desperate they were to get free, Toma decided to save them. Not long after that, the entire facility began falling apart, so the scientists ran away and left them all trapped in their cages. When they eventually got out of the rubble, they saw Toma, who then told them of his plan to end everything and offered to make them powerful in exchange for their loyalty. Back in the current time, ships from Destinia begin closing in on the shores of the demon continent. After one of the soldiers explains how much time they have to reach the shoreline, the captain starts giving a speech to make sure none of them have developed cold feet. While they prepare themselves for battle, Setsu's classmates start wishing they were back in the regular world. Using a magic detecting device, Thea tells them she has picked up Toma's magical energy signature from the demon continent and says he is the one they are meant to be fighting. After Grain tells them the general will label them as spies if they tell him, he says Setsu is probably going to pull another disappearing act on them at the last moment, but Yuri tells him he is definitely on his way to help. She further talks about the promise he made to her on the bridge before leaving, and that reminds them of his true nature. So Iruka and Grain decide to focus on stalling until he shows up. Thea then tells Yugi to focus on her goal to never kill anyone since they shouldn't even be fighting the demons in the first place. Moments later, they all reach the shores of the demon continent and charge in to start the war. As the demons use magic blasts to attack, Grain tells the girls and Setsu's classmates to follow him to the rear of the demon camp so they can avoid the front lines. The general then orders their magic users to return fire so the soldiers on the ground can make it into the demon camps, but the demons fight back to hold them off. By the time the soldiers eventually break through the walls and enter the demon camps, Grain and the others have already made it to the rear, so Iruka tells the students to avoid combat with demon soldiers trying to escape and makes them wait until the soldiers at the rear are reduced before she charges in with Grain and Thea to take out the strong ones. Upon seeing everyone fighting like true soldiers, Setsu's classmates get tired of being worthless NPCs, so they decide to join the fight, but one of them, who is still a useless weakling, gets too scared to move. As a demon soldier tries to carve her heart out, he gets dropped by fire magic, and Yuki rushes to check on her. After she promises to keep her safe, the battle rages on, and they eventually find the rest of their classmates gathered around one of the boys, as he tries to murk his first victim. Just as he tries to end the demon, Yui stops him and says he should spare the soldier since he is already wounded. The boy tells her to stop thinking the world is all sunshine and rainbows and tries to finish what he started, but she stops him again and starts begging him to reconsider. Just then, they hear a voice and see portals opening before giant armored knights fall through, and Yui immediately remembers them from that first day when Setsu saved her. The next moment, a demon girl comes up from another portal, and two human soldiers try to question her, but they instantly get their necks sliced open. Seeing as she slices through the human soldiers, the demons think they have the upper hand, but then the giant knights start attacking them as well. After Erika freezes one long enough for Grain to cut it down, they take a look inside and see that they are people being controlled by cursed magic. After taking a really close look at the samurai demon girl, they realize that she is Elise right before Amir takes off her hood and asks if they like her new look. Iruka immediately demands to know what she did to her, so Amir explains that Elise has become a puppet before asking if they also want to join her. Iruka immediately charges in to attack her, but she makes Elise fight in her place, so Iruka tries to stop her hypnosis. Thea and Grain then prepare to stop Amir, so she spills some of her blood and transforms it into 4 mutated monsters. After the monster snake tries to attack Elise and Iruka, she jumps away and creates icicles to stop it. Grain also easily finishes off the ape, so Amir sends the giant knights and dragon against him. After Thea then uses her powers to activate a triple threat combo to blast all 3 of them away, Iruka tells them to handle the last monster so she can face Amir. When Thea asks Amir if she still has any tricks up her sleeve, she runs out of moves and gets frustrated, so she sends Elise to finish them off. Unfortunately, she ends up being too unskilled for Grain as he easily counters her every move before knocking her out cold. The next moment, Iruka charges in to attack Amir, so she draws her blade, but Iruka easily tosses it aside and pierces right through her magic organ. After she drops, Iruka starts heading back, but then Amir gets back up and leaves them all stunned. Thea then says she can still sense her power increasing despite losing the magic organ, and Amir reveals that she has 2 of each organ from the experiments she endured in the research facility. She then tells him about how Toma saved her and says she is willing to sacrifice herself for him before activating the limit-breaking spell and summoning a chimera. With the magic she has left, she jumps on its head and merges with it to gain full control before attacking them. After she charges up for a blast, Yuhi and Thea manage to block it with their magic, but then she starts getting ready for another. Just as prepares to finish them off, Elise runs the sword through her back and stops the mind control. Elise then sheds a tear for her and hugs her while remembering the time they spent together in the village as she turns to stone. Shortly after that, Iruka and Grain check on Elise while the others try to hold themselves together, but then a cursed hand suddenly blasts out of the ground. Upon seeing Keijiro, Grain immediately senses that he is strong, but as they are all too weak to face him, Yui decides to step in and reminds them that she has been training for this exact reason. After Grain reluctantly accepts, Iruka makes her promise to give it her all, but just as she prepares herself for the fight, they all sense Setsu's aura and watch as he drops out of the sky. In the Beastman capital city earlier that day, a knight told Regulus that their soldiers were all fully prepped, so he ordered reinforcements be sent out to the demon nation. One of the nobles immediately stood against this decision and said it would leave their nation defenseless, but Regulus said they would all be safe because Setsu had already given his word. After he drops out of the sky, Yui excitedly runs into him and almost sucks faces, but he holds her back until she realizes her mistake and jumps back. She quickly apologizes and he tells her not to worry, but then she mentions a certain training she did with Iruka before getting on all fours and begging him to ride her like a pony. While Iruka expresses how proud she is, Setsu gets worried and hopes she won't spread her psychosis to all the baddies in his life. He then turns to face Keijiro, who starts by thanking him for showing up because he has been praying for a second round before taking off his robe to remind him of their fight during Sereno's wedding. After he charges up with cursed magic, Setsu decides to take him a bit seriously, and Yuri immediately activates her barrier magic to keep them shielded from the fight. Seeing that, Keijiro calls Yuhi and the others pathetic weaklings before asking Setsu why he is protecting them. After saying that he wouldn't have any baddies to clap if they were all dead, Setsu charges in to start their fight. At the time, Kuroinu is using ninja stars to blow up both human and demon soldiers, but then a sudden explosion pushes her back, and Shironeko jumps out with Mineko. After Mineko compliments her new look, Shironeko starts talking about how they know she has a good heart and offer to help her if she stops trying to end people. That only pisses her off, so she tries to smoke them with her blades, but they easily block it and realize they will have to beat some sense into her. After Kuroinu asks if they will offer up their lives for her cause, Mineko steps up to keep her from getting to Shironeko, and Kuroinu commends her for being the one with balls in the family. When she charges in for another attack, Shironeko blocks it to give Mineko a chance to escape, but Kuroinu says they will have to do more than jump to escape her before cutting into their skins. Shironeko then gives Mineko a signal and drop kicks Kuroinu's legs to make her unbalanced before Mineko uses her knees to slam her into the ground. Out of pity, Shironeko decides to end the fight, but then Kuroinu suddenly uses tentacles to snatch Mineko up. After saying she will make them pay for forcing her to use the hands of her sisters, she slams Shironeko to the ground and starts squeezing the life out of Mineko. Upon remembering how close they are, she suddenly gets even more pissed and decides to use the limit break skill to max out her powers. Shironeko manages to dodge her attack, but the arm goes right through the ground and hits her with a deadly punch that leaves her in immense pain while Mineko slowly gets her insides turned to paste. When Kuroinu calls Shironeko stupid for ever thinking they could be sisters, Mineko gets pissed and says they just wanted to support her. After getting back up, Shironeko says the same thing, but Kuroinu keeps attacking, so Shironeko jumps toward Mineko and activates a hidden skill that rips Kuroinu's tentacles to shreds before they both merge together. Even after seeing their secret ability, Kuroinu still tries to attack, so they demonstrate their insane speed and say she is no match for them. Kuroinu still decides to stand her ground despite already being scared and activates all her arms to attack them, but they use a spin attack to counter and rip all the arms off. After Kuroinu falls, they tell her to give up, but she gets back up and starts remembering life with her sisters before the experiments. When she tries to attack again, they crush her ribs with a body shot and separate from each other. Kuroinu then says that it's not fair for them to get a happy life together, so Mineko asks about her sisters, but Kuroinu has already lost all of her strength by then, so they leave her there to help the others. At the time, Builder stands alone in front of a group of demon soldiers, so they attack, thinking he will be easy to defeat, but none of their swords manage to leave even a scratch on him. He then easily blows them all away before bashing their heads with his fists and telling the rest to take their best shots. Just then, they all hear someone and watch as Ro drops in with a punch that sends Bildas flying. She immediately feels her wrist shattering but tells the soldiers to back off before Bildas gets back up and gives her props for managing to get the drop on him. After she also compliments his body of steel, he tells her how the scientists had turned him into a budget-friendly Wolverine with cheap adamantium before Toma showed up. She gets pissed hearing his name and tells Bildas that Toma is a tyrant. But Bildas says he already knows that and is still willing to fight for him so he can get his revenge on the world for abandoning him. When he starts roasting Luger for getting his brains blown out, she gets even more pissed and tries to break his jaw with a kick, but it barely has any effect on him and leaves her with a bleeding leg. She then tells him to never make fun of her people and starts charging up her fists to pound his brains in, but he says he has grown tired of her yapping and starts transforming his body into iron particles. After telling her to escape if she can, he fully dissolves into the iron particles and forms metal balls before attacking her from every direction until she starts coughing up blood. When she falls, he thinks she has already kicked the bucket and tries to go fight someone else, but she gets back up again. After she says she is willing to risk her life to win, he tries using the metal balls to stop her, but after even taking one in the eye, she still charges in and finally manages to make him spill some blood. Upon seeing her rage, Bildas decides to also unleash all of his powers as well, but she pushes him down and starts trying to punch through his steel body. As he smiles, thinking she can never get through, he suddenly feels a crack and immediately shoots iron spikes through her body. Just as he thinks it's finally over, she rips them off and crushes through his chest until her fist goes right into his iron heart. After the injuries finally get to her, he walks over and heals her with his magic. When she asks him why he didn't save himself, he tries to explain, but his injuries send him crashing down, so she asks why he is working with Toma. After he says it was the only way he could make the world pay for his suffering, she promises to always remember his name and leaves. At the time, Keijiro is still fighting with Setsu, who easily pushes him back and says his strikes are too weak. After using his shadow skill to paralyze him, Keijiro charges in for the final blow, but Setsu breaks out and blocks him before pushing him back again and telling him to call Toma because he is done playing on easy mode. Keijiro starts laughing and says he is going to risk it all for a win before releasing all of his powers with Limit Break. They both then charge in for the attack, but this time, Keijiro manages to block Setsu, so he jumps off a wall to gain more speed for a deadly slice aimed at his shoulder. Setsu still doesn't penetrate as a result of Keijiro's magic-absorbing armor and gets dropped by a nasty punch to the face. When Keijiro tells him to give up, Setsu decides to unleash some of his true strength for the first time and uses a Phantom Slice attack to shatter all of his armor. He then tells Keijiro that another attack might end his life, but Keijiro says he would rather lose it than fail to defeat him again. As he charges in with what's left of his sword, Setsu reluctantly delivers the final slice. With his last breath, Keijiro then thanks Setsu for making him fight with all he has and kicks the bucket. Just then, Toma senses that they have all been defeated, so he releases his cursed magic while heading into Sereno's castle so Setsu can find him. At the time, Livia has just found Sereno, who thinks they are already safe as she also senses the deaths of Toma's goons. Just as Livia tries to tell her that Setsu has shown up, Toma gets to them after taking out all the guards and starts lighting up the entire castle with his cursed magic. By the time Setsu makes it into the castle to find them, they have already taken a serious beating from Toma, who is glad to finally see him face to face, but says he feels bad for having to beat them up just to get his attention. Setsu immediately attacks and starts overpowering him, so he jumps back. Setsu then tells him to stop trying to end the world so they can talk, but he says it is too late for that and draws his sword, so Setsu attacks again, and he dodges to avoid getting split in half. After they both clash swords while charging up their magic, Setsu pushes Toma back, so he changes his sword to a curse-infused spear and throws it at him, but Setsu deflects it to the roof, and the cursed magic ends up splitting the sky open. While Sereno uses her barrier to stop the falling rubble, Setsu tells Toma to take his best shot, so he charges up and starts shooting out beams of cursed energy. Setsu then uses his Phantom Slice to block it, but when he ends up leaving his back wide open, Toma takes the opportunity to unleash the same technique and finally manages to land a hit. After they both charge in again, Setsu knocks Toma's sword away, but instead of cutting him down, he drops his sword and keeps pounding his face until he uses a magic blast to push him back and almost blows him up. He then gives Setsu props for still being as skilled as ever and pulls back his sword before transforming it into a mega-sized magic revolver. After a single shot from the gun blasts through the castle and opens up a hole in a nearby mountain, Setsu immediately knows it has to be stopped and kicks Toma away before he can use it again. Toma keeps on shooting, but he fails to land any of the shots, so he decides to switch to a machine gun and keeps pumping out exploding rounds while Setsu uses a barrier to remain in one piece. Upon seeing that Toma can't activate one in time for the second round, he summons his magic-absorbing sword and makes it swallow all the bullets before charging up and using both swords for a Phantom Slice that blows Toma up. After he manages to survive the blast, the rest of the girls get to the castle and call out to Setsu to tell him they are safe. Seeing him glad to see them reminds Toma of what happened 5 years ago, and that makes him go off the rails with an insane wave of cursed magic that Setsu immediately recognizes from that night on the bridge. After Toma transforms again and releases all the cursed magic he has to reach his final form, he starts blasting rounds faster than Setsu can dodge and laughs at him for being too slow to keep up before shooting out even more deadly beams of cursed magic. When Iruka and Grain start trying to hype Setsu up, Toma decides to put his focus on them and lets off 2 insane blasts, so Setsu tries to stop with his sword. One of them still gets to the castle, but they all combine their magic to create a barrier strong enough to block it, and that pisses Toma off. Just then Setsu stops him with a Phantom Slice, but he blocks it so Setsu overwhelms him with countless Phantom Slices until his shield breaks apart and leaves him open long enough for Setsu to send him crashing down. Right then, the jewel suddenly starts showing him flashes of his life again and fills him with hate before amplifying the cursed magic in his body and leaving him with a colossal cannon. After he lets off a blast, Setsu tries to block it with his barrier, but it breaks through and roasts him before he crashes into the bridge. When Toma gets there and sees that he can barely move, he claims victory and starts laughing hysterically until Setsu starts pulling himself back up and suddenly activates a dimensional skill to trap him. After Setsu starts charging up, Toma gets scared and tries to use his Buster Cannon, but then Setsu transforms his sword into a giant Earth Eater that starts swallowing up Toma. He freaks out and starts begging to be freed, but after seeing Setsu's cold and emotionless expression, he accepts his fate and melts into oblivion. Moments later, Toma wakes up on the bridge and is surprised to see that he is still alive. So Setsu explains that he never wanted to finish him off and has just made the sword absorb the cursed magic that was controlling him. He starts tearing up and asks why he saved him despite all he has done, but Setsu says it is so that he can pay for what he has done instead of having an easy escape to the afterlife. The rest of the gang gets to the bridge shortly after, and a couple of days later, Setsu goes to see him in the dungeon with Sereno and Regulus. After Setsu says his punishment is to sacrifice his magic on a transfer spell to send his classmates back, Toma gets surprised that they are giving him such a trivial punishment for his genocide attempt. Sereno then explains that he will basically become a walking stick man without his magic, and Regulus laughs at the idea of him being unable to use magic anymore. After Setsu tells him to start over back in the regular world, Sereno and Regulus tell him to take the offer so they won't have to change their minds, and he accepts with tears of regret. At the throne room in Destinia shortly after that, he activates the transfer spell and Setsu's classmates excitedly rush in to get back to their regular lives. Later on, at the bridge, Setsu asks Toma why he refused to go back with them, so he says he wants to travel the world to see if he can fix what he has broken. After Setsu wishes him luck, they promise to see each other again later. Not long after that, Setsu also gets ready to leave, but Iruka starts crying while begging to leave with him, so Thea and Grain tell her she can't leave her duties to be his human pony. After Yui shows up with her bags, he tells her about his plans to be sure she is okay with it before they both say goodbye and start heading out. They first pay a visit to Levia, who tries to tell them that the seas are completely safe before another Kraken shows up to fight her. Afterwards, they get to the Demon Continent to see Sereno, and she also gets excited to show them her nation's progress as well as Ruri's new squid ring stand that has already become the nation's favorite food spot. Outside Regulus's castle later on, the guards refuse to let him in again, but Ro drops in with Shironeko and Mineko before taking him inside and telling him they have become commanders in the army. With the world finally at peace again, they both start traveling all over it to find new adventures. Will Setsu end up being faithful to Yuhi alone, or will he end up with even more mythical baddies to smash and finally start a harem? That is it for this video. Leave a thumbs up if you liked it and subscribe to the channel for similar content. And as always, thanks for watching.